Sampling and analysis of imported food. In this session, we will learn about the procedure that has to be followed during the sampling and procedures that has to be adopted by the authorized officer during the forwarding of these samples to the laboratory, and what are the precautions that has to be taken during the sampling process. What is the objective of sampling? Sampling involves the random selection of a certain portion, number of container and product units from a particular lot of the same food. It must be a representative sample. Sampling is done on the basis of product specification and not on the basis of the size of the product. What are the activities involved in the sampling process? It involves collection of the representative samples, the preparation of the samples, and the analysis of the samples using the proper methods or technique and instruments by the labs. So, all these activities are important in the process of sampling, analysis and reporting of test results of the tested samples in the import clearance process. There are certain precautions that have to be taken by the authorized officers or his representatives during the sampling process. It has to be ensured that clean, dry, leak-proof, wide mouth and sterile containers such as glass, stainless steel or of suitable plastic material of a size suitable for the sample of the product must be used for the process. Dry or canned foods that are not perishable and are collected at the room temperature or the ambient temperature need not be refrigerated. The cap or the stopper of the sample container should be securely fastened so as to make it airtight and to prevent leakage of the contents of the sample during the transit from the sample drawing point to the sample reaches the lab. And in case of products which require special storage conditions, like for example frozen food products or products which are stored under chilled conditions, in such cases the samples drawn have to be taken in pre-chilled containers, and during the transit or the transportation of the samples to the lab also the storage condition has to be maintained or the storage norms have to be followed. That is, it has to be transported in with either dry ice or with gel pack so that the required temperature conditions are maintained till the product sample reaches the lab. And it shall be ensured that the samples drawn are handed over or deposited to the laboratory at the earliest and immediately on the same day, at least on the same day itself. Before sampling of the imported food products, the authorized officer also has to ensure that the consignment, the products in the consignment are in compliance with the FSS, the food safety and standards, labeling and packaging regulations, and also that the product has a valid shelf life and the physical conditions of the consignment are also in conformance. So, unless the consignment is in, if it is in conformance with the packaging and labeling regulations, it has all the mandatory or labeling declarations as required under the FSS Act and regulations thereunder, and has got a valid shelf life, and the consignment is fit for sampling, the samples are drawn from the consignment by the authorized officer. And during the process of sampling, the authorized officer has to draw two parts of the sample. That is, one part of the sample will be forwarding to the notified laboratory for the analysis, and the second part of the sample will be retained by the authorized officer as a reference sample. And in case of aseptic packages or in case of consignments, bulk consignments, wherein which having product which requires aseptic storage condition, which has been manufactured under aseptic conditions, or with product which contains products which are hygroscopic, the representative samples provided with the consignment can be taken as the laboratory samples, and in such cases the importer as well as the manufacturer has to provide a declaration to the authorized officer that the representative samples are true representatives of the products in the imported consignment, and based on the declaration that is given by the importer and the manufacturer of the imported consignment, the authorized officer can draw the representative samples which are provided along with the consignment, and in such cases the manufacturer has to provide two representative samples along with this declaration stating that the articles of food match with the products in the sealed container. The samples so drawn are then forwarded to the laboratories, to the notified laboratories for analysis and as per the FSS regulations, and the samples before forwarding has to be properly sealed and labeled by the authorized officer. Now the sealed samples, as I said, has to be properly labeled. And what does the label, what are the labeling informations to be given on the sample labels? That is the code number of the sample, the unique code number which can either which is generated in the online food import clearance system of FSSAI, or the code number can be a unique code number can be made and recorded by the authorized officer. A manual record can also be maintained. This code number has to be given on the for that particular sample on its label. Then the date of place of collection has to be recorded. The quantity of sample that is being forwarded, that also has to be mentioned on the product on the sample labels. Then the name of the product, the generic name of the product, and the category, food category under which this product will fall under in the Food Product Standards and Food Additives Regulation, that also has to be mentioned on the label. Then the sample label has to be signed by the authorized officer or his representative, and also the name and signature of the food importer or his authorized representative, that is a custom house agent, has also to be obtained on the product labels. And this label is affixed on the samples which are forwarded to the laboratories. One part of sealed and labeled sample is forwarded by the authorized officer to the notified laboratory for analysis. An authorized officer is also responsible to ensure that the sample integrity is maintained from the time of collection of the sample at the point of sampling till the time the sample has been delivered to the laboratory. The second part of the sample that has been drawn during the process has to be retained by the authorized officer under the appropriate storage conditions as required by the lab. If it is a normal, if it is a product which requires only an ambient storage condition, it can be stored at the room temperature conditions. But products which require special storage conditions, like samples of frozen food products or samples which require refrigerated storage conditions, has to be maintained at the required storage as per the norms. Now, if once the laboratory has analyzed the sample and they have issued the reports for the samples, and it has been observed that the sample analysis during the analysis the sample is found to be conforming, the remaining sample can be returned to the importer within 10 days of the issuance of the no objection certificate. If sample is not found conforming, or sample has failed the test and is not as per the FSS specifications, then on request of the importer, the second part of the sample that has been retained in the custody of the authorized officer will be forwarded to the referral laboratory for analysis. Now, the regulation also specifies the quantity of sample that has to be collected for analysis. For each type of food product, the quantity has been specified. For example, in case of products like cheese or cheese spread, minimum quantity of 200 grams, that is, each sample of 200 grams has to be collected from the consignment. In case of products like spices and condiments, the minimum quantity is about 500 grams. Then, for example, products like edible oils and fats, minimum quantity of 400 grams per sample has to be drawn from the consignment. In case of products like canned food products, at least minimum of 6 sealed cans have to be drawn for the laboratory testing purposes. And in a case of products for which the quantity has not been specified under this laboratory and sample analysis regulation, like for example proprietary foods, health supplements and nutraceuticals, and minimum of 500 grams per sample has to be drawn as a laboratory sample. After drawing of sample, as we said, the sample has to be properly packed and sealed. This is done to ensure the integrity of the sample and so as to ensure that the samples are not tampered with. The sample as drawn from the representative sample that has been drawn from the consignment reaches the laboratory without any tampering. In this case, we have to ensure that the stoppers of the containers or the caps of the containers in which the sample has been drawn is securely fastened so as to prevent the leakage of the contents during the transit. And the container in which the sample has to be drawn has to then be wrapped with thick paper, and the ends of the paper shall be neatly folded and affixed by means of gum or other packing and sealing adhesives. and a paper slip of the size that goes around completely from the bottom to the top of the container bearing the signature of the authorized officer and code number of the sample shall be pasted on the wrapper. The signature and thumb impression of the person from whom the sample has, from whose consignment the sample has been taken, has also to be affixed in such a manner that the paper slip and the wrapper both carry a part of the signature or the thumb impression. Then the outer covering of the pack shall can also be marked with the code number of the sample. Now, once the samples are properly packed and sealed, the samples are dispatched to the laboratory, and during dispatch also it should be ensured that there is no damage, samples are not damaged during the transit process. This can be ensured by use of shock absorbing materials and waterproof packing materials to protect them from damage en route to the laboratory. And as we have mentioned earlier also, the samples which require special storage conditions, care must be taken that the required storage temperature conditions are maintained throughout from the sampling time till the time the sample reaches the lab, and this can be done by packing in insulated cartons or with containing dry ice or gel pack that will last till the whole length of the transit time. And in case any special precautions in handling or storing of the samples are needed, the authorized officer should ensure that the persons who will be handling the samples, both during the transit till it reaches the laboratory, are kept informed of what is the precautions that has to be taken during the handling and transporting of the samples. The samples so drawn are forwarded to the FSSAI notified laboratories for analysis. The first part of the sample, as we have said, goes to the primary notified laboratory. We have about 172 notified laboratories as on date who are authorized by FSSAI to test the food products drawn under the food import clearance system for analysis. And second part of the sample, in case of any appeal that is received from the importer, in case of non-conformance report issued by the first laboratory, the second part of the sample is sent to the referral laboratories. As on date, there are about 19 referral laboratories notified by FSSAI to function as referral laboratories, as apex laboratories for FSSAI. Now, in case of certain provisions have been given in the import regulation to notify the laboratories of the exporting country. Based on the test reports issued by the notified laboratory in the exporting country, the consignments can be cleared. So, under this, the recognition of the accredited labs in two countries, that is Bangladesh and Bhutan, have been done by FSSAI, and in such cases, in case of any consignment that has been imported from Bangladesh or Bhutan, and where FSSAI has already notified that the test report from a particular laboratory of that exporting country can be accepted for clearance of the consignment. In such cases, the test analysis certificate issued by these laboratories can be accepted for the import clearance of the consignment imported from that country. The samples that are forwarded to the laboratory by the authorized officer, once it reaches the notified laboratories, it has to be analyzed by the laboratories notified by the food authority. The authorized officer forwards the first part of the sample to the notified laboratory, and the second part will always be retained. In case of only any appeal, it is used or it is forwarded by the authorized officer for retesting. Both the notified and the referral lab will be issuing the test report to the authorized officer in the Form 2 format that is given in the FSS import regulation, that is the Food Safety and Standards import regulation. And the test report by the notified and both by the notified and the referral lab has to issue the test report within 7 days from the date of receipt of the samples in the lab. And based on the analysis report issued by the lab, the no objection certificate or the non-conformance certificates are issued by the authorized officers.